The moment I walked into my childhood home, I could tell something wasn't right. The familiar smell of Mom's rose-scented perfume was still in the air, but the warm feeling I expected wasn't there. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness that made my stomach feel tight. My name is Susan. After spending a year working overseas to grow my career, I thought coming home would feel comforting, like putting on a favorite sweater. But I was wrong. "Mama!" I called out, dragging my suitcase across the old wooden floor. My voice echoed through the house, followed by the sound of pots clattering in the kitchen. "Susan? Mija?" Mom said as she came out, wiping her hands on her apron. She hugged me tightly, but something felt off. She pulled away too fast. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow," she said. "I got an earlier flight," I explained, looking around the living room. It all looked the same, except one thing. "Where's Jessica's portrait?" Mom's smile faded. "We had to move some things while you were gone. Barbara's wedding planning took over the house." I walked to the empty wall and touched the faded mark where the portrait used to hang. "And Jessica's ring? I want to wear it now that I'm back." The silence was loud. My heart started to beat faster. "Mama?" I asked again. "Where's the ring?" She wouldn't look at me. "We needed it for Barbara's wedding. The place she wanted cost a lot." "You sold it?" I said quietly, but it felt like yelling. "That ring was meant for me. Jessica promised it to me." "You've been gone too long, Susan," Mom said sharply. "Barbara needed it more. She's staying here, starting her life. You've been running around Europe chasing dreams." Just then, the front door opened and Barbara walked in, holding a bunch of wedding magazines in her perfectly polished hands. "Susan." "Oh my God, you're early," she said, walking over to hug me. I stepped back. "You sold Jessica's ring?" Barbara's smile faded. She looked at Mom, then at me. "Oh, that. It was just sitting in a box." "Just sitting in a box?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "That ring was the last thing Jessica gave me before she died. She made you both promise it would be mine when I turned 29. That was 2 months ago." Mom stepped in again. "And where were you?" "Off working." "Too busy to come home and celebrate with your family." "I was in the middle of closing a big deal. You knew that." Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the moment Jessica took off her ring and placed it in my hand. "Cynthia Nixon," she said softly. "This ring has survived wars, crossed oceans. It belongs to someone strong, someone who fights for what's right." "It's done, Susan," Mom said firmly. "The ring is gone. Barbara's wedding is in 3 months. Be happy for your sister." Or what?" I asked, but she didn't answer. She just shook her head and went back into the kitchen. Barbara stepped closer and spoke in a lower voice. "I know you're mad, but this wedding means everything to me and Paul. The venue was perfect and we didn't have the money. I thought you'd understand." I looked at my sister, the same person I used to laugh with, share secrets with, even protect from bullies at school. Now she stood there all dressed up, without a hint of guilt for taking what was promised to me. "Congratulations." "On your wedding, Barbara," I said calmly, even though I felt like screaming. I hope the venue was worth it. I grabbed my suitcase and walked upstairs to my old room, ignoring her calling my name. Once inside, I locked the door, sat on my bed, and took out my phone. I texted Margaret. They sold it. They really sold. "Jessica's ring," Margaret replied right away. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the photo on my nightstand, me and Jessica on my college graduation day. Her hand was holding mine, and the ring sparkled in the sun. I could still hear her voice in my head. "Sometimes, mi amor, justice isn't about yelling or fighting. It's about being smart and making people face what they've done." I typed back, "I'm going to make them regret it. Every single dollar they got for that ring." From downstairs, I heard Barbara happily talking about table decorations and flower colors. I even heard Mom laughing. My jaw tightened. They thought they could push me aside. They thought they could ignore Jessica's wishes just because I'd been away. But I was back now. And I wasn't the quiet little girl they remembered. I was the woman Jessica believed in. Someone who fights for what really matters, no matter what it takes. The next morning, I went to a nearby coffee shop. I opened my laptop and started going through my family's financial records. Being a financial analyst had its benefits, especially when it came to finding things people thought they'd hidden well. More coffee? The barista asked, standing beside my table. Yes, please, I said without looking up. I nodded without looking up from my screen. Something didn't make sense. The cost of Barbara's wedding venue was extremely high, but the money from Jessica's ring wouldn't even pay for half of it. There had to be more to this. My phone buzzed with a text from Barbara. Dress fitting at 2. You're coming, right? I quickly replied, of course. At the same time, I opened a new browser tab. That's when I saw it. A mortgage approval from 2 weeks ago. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I searched property records. Wow, I whispered. They didn't just sell Jessica's ring for the wedding. They used the money as part of a down payment on a house. Barbara and Paul's dream. House? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Margaret. Found anything? Meet me for lunch. I need your legal help. An hour later, Margaret slid into the booth at our favorite diner. Tell me everything, she said, ordering coffee without even glancing at the menu. I pushed my laptop across the table. They bought a house. The ring money was part of the down payment. Margaret's eyes widened as she scrolled through the screen. This house is beautiful, but hold on. She leaned in closer. Something's weird about how this mortgage is set up. Exactly, I said. They barely qualified. If they missed just one payment, they could lose the whole thing. Susan, Margaret said seriously, whatever you're planning. I know the real estate agent, I interrupted. Timothy from high school. He managed the sale. Margaret crossed her arms. And he owes me. Remember when I helped his sister with her visa papers? Before Margaret could respond, the waitress came with our food. I waited until she walked away. I'm not doing anything illegal, I told Margaret. I just want to ask Timothy about any properties he has coming up, including this one, just in case. Margaret took a bite of her sandwich and chewed slowly. You're planning to buy their house if they fall behind on payments, aren't you? I shrugged, poking at my fries. I'm just exploring options. Margaret lowered her voice. Be careful. This isn't just about the ring anymore. You're right, I said, checking the time. It's about respect, about family, about promises. I stood up and grabbed my purse. Speaking of which, I have a dress fitting to attend. The bridal shop was just as fancy as I thought it would be. Barbara stood on a little platform surrounded by mirrors while Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue. You look beautiful, mi amor, Mom said with teary eyes. I forced a smile as Barbara spun around in her designer dress. The dress is perfect, I said. And it was. Simple, classy, everything Barbara wasn't. I knew you'd love it, Barbara said happily. And just wait until you see the house, Susan. It's perfect. Paul and I move in next week. I can't wait. I smiled and replied while my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Timothy. Free for coffee tomorrow? Need to catch up. Oh, Barbara clapped her hands. You should come to dinner tonight. Paul's parents are coming over, and Dad's making his famous paella. Wouldn't miss it, I said, quickly texting Timothy back. Tomorrow at 11, the usual place. That evening, I sat quietly at the dinner table, watching my family laugh and plan Barbara's perfect wedding. Paul's parents were kind and polite, completely unaware of the tension under the surface. Dad raised his glass. To Barbara and Paul and their fresh start. Everyone clinked glasses. I took a sip of wine, watching Barbara's well-manicured hands. I wondered if she ever thought about the ring that should have been on mine. Susan's been quiet, Barbara said suddenly. Tell us about Europe. Did you meet anyone special? I smiled and set down my glass. Actually, I met someone recently. Everyone leaned in, curious. A real estate agent. Mom's fork hit her plate. You're thinking of buying a house? I'm just exploring my options, I said calmly, repeating what I'd told Margaret. You never know when the perfect opportunity will show up. The conversation moved on, but I noticed Mom watching me with narrowed eyes. She always said I had Jessica's smile, the one that didn't quite reach the eyes when I was hiding something. Tomorrow I'd meet Timothy. And after that, well, like Jessica used to say, patience is part of being wise. And I had both. Timothy hadn't changed much since high school. He still had that easy smile and his habit of tapping his fingers when he was nervous. We met in a quiet corner of the coffee shop, away from the morning crowd. So, he said, sliding a folder across the table, here are the records you wanted. I opened the folder and started reading. Tell me what I'm looking at. Timothy lowered his voice. Your sister and Paul barely qualified for their mortgage. They're pushing it to the edge. Even with the money from the ring, the down payment just met the minimum requirement. I asked the question that had been bothering me for days. How much was the ring worth? Timothy hesitated. On the market, maybe around $25,000, but they sold it to a private collector who paid $35,000. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. $25,000. That's all they thought Jessica's legacy was worth. There's something else, Timothy added, pointing to a part of the contract. The seller added a clause, right of first refusal. What does that mean? If they miss payments in the first year, the house goes back up for sale. But with strict rules, it'll be hard for most buyers to qualify. Timothy looked at me carefully. Unless, he said, someone has a strong credit score and money ready to go. My phone buzzed. It was Margaret. How's the meeting? Don't do anything stupid. I didn't reply. Not yet. I leaned in. What exactly do you owe my sister and Paul? Nothing, Timothy said with a shrug. They're just clients, but you... He smiled. You helped my sister stay in the country. I haven't forgotten that. I nodded slowly. So if a new buyer came along, one with better finances, Timothy raised an eyebrow. Then I'd have to show the offer to the seller. That's the law. I gathered the papers and slipped them into my bag. Thanks, Timothy. I really appreciate this. Susan, he called as I stood up. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Real estate can get messy. Don't worry, I said with a smile. I learned from the best. Remember? High school debate team captain. An hour later, I was sitting in Margaret's law office, spreading the documents across her desk. This is crazy, she said, scanning the mortgage terms. They're one missed payment away from losing the house. Exactly, I said, opening my laptop. And look at this. Barbara's wedding budget. She accidentally sent it to my old email. Margaret let out a low whistle as she read through. The numbers. Wow. These are some very expensive choices. They can't afford it, I said quietly. They're hoping wedding gifts will cover the rest. But between the mortgage, property taxes, and wedding bills, it's all going to fall apart, Margaret said, finishing my sentence. But Susan, if you're planning what I think you are... I have the money, I cut in. That big deal I closed in Europe? The bonus was huge. This isn't just about money, Margaret said, leaning back. It's about family. Are you sure you're ready for how this could change everything? For them? And for you? My phone lit up with a message from Barbara. Cake tasting tomorrow. Don't be late like you were for the dress fitting. They didn't think twice about what selling Jessica's ring would do to me, I said, showing Margaret the text. And I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just being smart. Margaret sighed and grabbed a legal pad. All right. If we're going to do this, we do it properly. First, you'll need a shell company to buy the house. Your name stays hidden until the last moment. We spent the next hour planning everything. Margaret used her legal skills to guide me through all the steps. By the time I left her office, the plan was in motion. At the cake tasting the next day, I watched Barbara and Paul try different flavors, laughing and smiling. Try this one, Barbara said, handing me a plate. It's champagne cake with raspberry filling. I took a bite, thinking about the folder of documents in my bag. It's perfect, I said, just like everything else in your wedding. I know, Barbara said, glowing. And wait until you see the house. Paul's parents are helping us furnish it as a gift. That's really generous, I said with a smile, thinking about the clause in their mortgage contract, the one about furnishing loans and how risky it made everything. When do you move in? I asked. Right after the honeymoon, Barbara said with a dreamy smile. It's like a fairy tale, isn't it? Everything is coming together perfectly. I thought about Jessica's ring, probably locked away in some collector's vault. I thought about the missing portrait from our wall, about the promises they broke and the memories they sold. Yes, I said, taking another bite of cake, just like a fairy tale. But fairy tales, as Jessica used to tell me, weren't always happy. Some were warnings, covered in sweetness, with lessons about greed, betrayal, and what happens when people make the wrong choices. And I was about to teach my family a lesson they would never forget. The real estate office was full of noise as I signed the final papers under my shell. Company's name? Timothy sat across from me, sliding each document over one by one. Remember, he said quietly, timing is everything. One mistake, and this could all fall apart. I know, I said, adding my initials to another page. Has Barbara made her mortgage payment this month? Timothy checked his computer. Barely. They had to pull money from their wedding fund. He lowered his voice even more. The caterer called me yesterday. Their last check bounced. Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. Family dinner tonight. No excuses. Perfect timing, I muttered, signing the last document. How long until everything's ready? 3 weeks, max, Timothy said, collecting the papers. Just in time for the wedding. That evening, I walked into my parents' house and found Barbara crying at the kitchen table. What happened? I asked, though I already knew. The florist, Barbara sobbed. They now want full payment up front. They say their policy changed. Mom gave me a sharp look as she gently rubbed Barbara's back. It's okay, mi amor. We'll figure something out. I could help, I said, sounding innocent. I have some savings. No, Dad said firmly, walking into the kitchen. We don't need your money, Susan. We'll handle it as a family. Like you handled Jessica's ring? The bye. Words slipped out before I could stop them. The kitchen went completely quiet. Barbara's sobs turned into small hiccups. That's enough, Mom snapped. We're not talking about this again. Fine, I said, sitting down and watching. Dad served the enchiladas. How's the house, Barbara? Everything ready? Barbara wiped her eyes and gave a small smile. Almost. The painters come next week. Then we move in, if we can afford it. Paul joined us at the table. He looked tired and stressed. The interest rates on our credit cards just went up. I took a bite of enchilada and tried not to smile. Amazing what a few calls to credit card companies about suspicious activity could do. You two are just nervous before the wedding, Mom said quickly. Everything will be fine. My phone buzzed again. It was Margaret. Papers are filed. You're officially the ghost buyer. Speaking of work, I said, slipping my phone back into my bag, I might be looking to buy some property around. Here, I said. Any advice, Paul? You work in real estate, right? Paul shifted in his seat. Actually, I'm between projects right now. The market's a little tricky. That's not what I heard, I said, keeping my tone light. Timothy mentioned some interesting opportunities coming up. Barbara's fork dropped onto her plate. "You've been talking to Timothy?" "We were just catching up," I shrugged. "We were friends in high school, remember?" The tension at the table was thick. Mom narrowed her eyes. Dad stared hard at his food. Barbara and Paul exchanged nervous looks. "More enchiladas?" Dad asked, trying to change the subject. Later that night, as I was driving home, Margaret called. "The florist called," she said. "They're willing to work with Barbara on the payment plan." "How flexible?" I asked. "They'll take half now and the rest after the wedding." "But Susan," Margaret paused. "I saw the guest list. Over 220 people? The numbers don't make sense." "They never did," I said, pulling into my driveway. "That's the whole point." The next morning, I met Timothy at the house Barbara and Paul were planning to move into. The painters were on break, so we had the living room to ourselves. "The seller is interested in your offer," Timothy said, his voice echoing off the walls. "If anything happens with the current buyers..." I walked to the window, looking out at the perfect green lawn. "And the timing?" Timothy checked his phone. "Their next mortgage payment is due 2 days before the wedding. If they miss it, everything's in place." I turned around and looked at the spot where Barbara wanted to hang her wedding pictures. The corner she picked for the Christmas tree. "Having second thoughts?" Timothy asked. "No," I said, pulling out my phone and showing him a photo of Jessica's ring. "They made their choice. Now they'll deal with it." That afternoon, Barbara called me in a panic. "The wedding planner just quit," she cried. She said something about her values and bounced checks. "Susan, what am I going to do?" "Breathe," I said calmly. "I'll help you find another one." "Really? But you've been so distant lately." "You're my sister," I said, thinking of the papers locked in my safe. Family helps family, right? After the call, another message from Margaret popped up. "Last chance to back out." I looked at the photo of Jessica on my desk, her ring shining in the sunlight. She always said, "The most important lessons usually cost the most." I texted back, "No backing out. This whole thing is about to fall apart." 1 week before the wedding, I stood in Barbara and Paul's future kitchen. They were whispering angrily near the granite counter they couldn't afford. "We can't keep using the wedding money," Paul said, his voice tight. "The mortgage is due in 5 days." "My parents will help," Barbara replied, but her voice shook. "They always do." "They can't," I said from the doorway, making them both jump. "Dad's credit cards are maxed out." "I saw the credit card bills on Dad's desk yesterday," I said. Barbara's face fell. "Why are you here, Susan? To laugh at me?" "I'm here to help with the wedding, like you asked," I said, placing my laptop on the counter. "Unless you don't want my help anymore." Paul ran his hands through his hair. "I need to make some calls." He walked out, already dialing. His phone. Barbara leaned against the counter. "Everything's falling apart," she whispered. "The caterer is threatening to cancel. The venue wants the final payment tomorrow. And now the house..." "You could delay the wedding," I said, watching her closely. "No," she said, standing up straight. "Everything has to be perfect. We invited everyone. Everything is booked. I can't be the failure in the family." "Like me?" I asked softly. The room went quiet. Barbara's eyes filled with tears. "That's not what I meant. You're successful. It's just, you've been gone so long." "Too focused on my career," I said, repeating what Mom had said before. "Susan, about the ring." My phone buzzed. It was Timothy. "Payment deadline is tomorrow. They haven't made any arrangements." "I have to go," I said, picking up my bag. "Wedding emergency to handle." As I reached the door, Barbara called out, "Wait, I never thanked you for helping these last few weeks." I turned around and looked at her. Really looked. For the first time since I got back, I saw my little sister. She looked small and scared. Not like the confident bride who had once ignored how I felt about Jessica's ring. That's what family does, I said, though the words felt bitter in my mouth. When I got home, Margaret was waiting at my front door. "We need to talk," she said, following me inside. "I just spoke with the venue," she said. "They're giving Barbara and Paul until tomorrow at noon to pay, or they're canceling." "I know," I said, pouring us both some wine. "Their mortgage payment is due the same day." Margaret set her glass down without drinking. "I saw them today. They were walking near the park by my office. They looked happy, in love, even with everything going on." "Love doesn't pay bills," I said sharply, "or bring back what they sold." Just then, a knock on the door cut me off. I opened it and saw Paul. He looked stressed and tired. "I need your help," he said right away. "I know we're not close, but Barbara loves you, and I love her." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He started pacing in my living room. "I messed up," he admitted. "The development job I was working on? It fell through months ago. I didn't tell anyone. I've just been picking up consulting jobs to keep things going. But now reality is catching up," I finished for him. "Please," he said, eyes red. "I'll pay you back every dollar. I just need help with the mortgage this once." Margaret gave me a serious look. "Susan." I walked to my desk and pulled out the folder of documents. I had been collecting everything. "Paul, how much do you really know about your mortgage?" I asked. "The right of first refusal? The fast default terms?" I laid the papers out on my coffee table. "Did you read any of this?" His face turned pale. "How did you get these?" "The same way I got these," I said, adding more documents. "Credit card bills, bounced check notices, and the catering contract with unpaid balances." "You've been watching us," he said quietly. "Planning something. Like you planned. To sell my grandmother's ring?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Like you planned a perfect life you can't even afford?" Paul took a step back. "Barbara was right. You've changed." "No," I said. "I just stopped letting people take what's mine." He didn't say another word. He left, gently closing the door behind him. "That was harsh," Margaret said into the quiet. "That was honest," I replied, putting the papers back into the folder. "Something my family hasn't been in a long time." My phone lit up. It was a message from Barbara. "Whatever you're planning, please don't do it. Not before the wedding. I'm begging you." I showed the message to Margaret. She shook her head. "It's not too late to stop." But as I looked at my hand, the one that should have worn Jessica's ring, I knew it had been too late the day they sold it. "The payment deadline is tomorrow," I said, finishing my wine. "Let's see if love can really fix everything." The wedding day came with sunny skies and awful timing. I stood in front of the church mirror, fixing my bridesmaid dress, while my phone buzzed again and again. "Timothy. Payment missed. They've defaulted." Margaret. "Venue paid. Last minute. Wedding is still happening." Timothy. "Offer accepted. Papers are ready. You own the house." "You look beautiful," Mom said, appearing behind me in the mirror. "Almost as beautiful as Barbara." "Almost," I repeated, watching her face. "Did you help them pay the venue?" Mom's smile tightened. "We sold some things. More family heirlooms." "That's enough, Susan," she said, holding my shoulders. "Today is your sister's day. Don't ruin it." The church filled with well-dressed guests, all waiting for Barbara's perfect moment. I stood in my spot, holding my bouquet, watching Paul fidget at the front. Then the music started. Barbara walked down the aisle on Dad's arm, glowing in her white dress, smiling behind her veil. For a second, I almost gave in. Then I saw it, a new ring on her finger, covered in diamonds, expensive. My stomach turned. Dearly beloved. The priest began. My phone buzzed silently in the pocket of my dress. "Timothy. It's done. You officially own the house." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of vows and promises. Promises, I thought bitterly, just like the one they made to Jessica about her ring. At the reception, Barbara danced with Paul, both of them smiling, like nothing was wrong. I sat quietly at my assigned table, watching the champagne being poured. I knew each bottle stood for money they didn't really have. "You okay?" Margaret asked, sliding into the seat beside me. "Perfect," I said, pulling an envelope from my clutch. The timing couldn't be better. "Susan, please." Margaret started, but just then the DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Maid of Honor's speech." I stood up, envelope in hand, and walked to the microphone. The room fell silent. "My sister, Barbara," I began, "has always known exactly what she wanted. The perfect wedding, the perfect house, the perfect life." I paused and looked her in the eye, and she's always known how to get it. Barbara's smile faded just a little. "When we were kids," I continued, "Barbara wanted my favorite doll. She cried until our parents made me give it to her. When we were teens, she wanted my prom date, and she got him too." The guests shifted in their seats, whispering quietly. "But this year," I said, holding up my phone, "she wanted something that wasn't hers to take." I showed a picture of Jessica's ring. This ring survived wars, crossed oceans, and was promised to me. But Barbara wanted a perfect wedding more than she wanted to keep that promise. "Susan," Mom said sharply from her seat. But I didn't. "Stop." So today, on Barbara's perfect day, I wanted to give her and her new husband a gift. I held up the envelope. Something to match their perfect taste. Paul stood up. He looked pale. "Susan, don't—" "It's the deed to your dream house," I said. "Or should I say, my dream house now?" The room gasped. "You missed your mortgage payment yesterday, the one you needed to keep this wedding going. Because of that, the deal fell through." And I was there, ready to buy. People around the room started whispering and gasping. Barbara's makeup began to run as tears filled her eyes. "You can't," she said into the mic, barely a whisper. "That's our home." "It was your home," I said calmly, "just like this was my ring." I placed the envelope on their table. "Call it karma or justice. Either way, you have 29 days to move out. Congratulations on your perfect wedding." I turned to walk away, but Barbara grabbed my arm. "How could you?" she cried. "We're family." "Family?" I said, pulling my arm free. "Family keeps promises. Family respects memories. Family doesn't sell what doesn't belong to them." "Enough," Dad's voice boomed across the room. "Both of you, outside, now." In the garden behind the venue, surrounded by the roses Barbara had chosen, our family's drama hit its breaking point. "Fix this," Mom demanded. "Give them back the house." "Like they gave back my ring?" I asked, looking straight at her. Barbara sank down onto a bench, her white dress gathering around her feet. "We needed the money," she whispered. "We were desperate." "And now you're homeless," I replied coldly. "Funny how karma works." "Please," Dad said quietly. "We can work this out," Dad said. I looked at them. Mom wiping angry tears, Dad looking disappointed, Barbara's makeup smeared from crying, and Paul standing there with a tired, hopeless expression. But all I felt was a cold sense of justice. "The house is mine," I said calmly. "Just like the ring should have been mine. You all made your choices. Now deal with them." I turned and walked away, leaving them in the garden. Behind me, I could hear crying and whispers. In my purse, the house keys jingled with every step, a quiet song of revenge finally done. The next morning, I sat in the kitchen, my kitchen now, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. The silence made what I'd done feel even louder. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night. Mom. How could you do this to your sister? Dad. We need to talk. Margaret. Call me when you're ready. Barbara. Please, we can fix this. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it and saw Paul, still in his wedding suit looking like he hadn't slept at all. Can I come in? He asked, voice low and rough. I stepped aside. He looked around at the boxes. You moved in fast, he said with a bitter smile. I learned from the best, I replied. How's Barbara? Heartbroken, he said, rubbing his face. She's at your parents' house, crying. She feels like she's lost everything, her sister, her home, her dream life, and the ring. Paul looked at me. That's why I'm here. I found something you need to see. He pulled out his phone and showed me an email. The collector who supposedly bought your grandmother's ring? He's willing to sell it back. My heart jumped. What's the price? Double. $50,000, Paul said. I let out a bitter laugh. And why are you telling me this? Because I know where the ring really is, he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. Barbara never sold it. She pawned it. My head spun. What? She planned to get it back after the wedding, once things calmed down. The story about the collector was to make you believe it was gone for good so you wouldn't go looking for it. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a pawn shop ticket dated 2 months ago. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because I love Barbara, he said simply, but what she did was wrong. And now both of us are paying for it. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Barbara. She still had her wedding dress on, and her mascara had run down her cheeks. You weren't supposed to tell her, she yelled at Paul, pushing past me into the house. That was our only leverage. Leverage? I grabbed her arm. You were going to blackmail me with Jessica's ring? I was desperate, she said, pulling away. The house, the wedding. Everything was falling apart. I needed you to give it back. Give it back? I repeated. My voice was cold now. I stepped closer to her. Like you gave back my ring? Oh, wait, you didn't. You pawned it like it was cheap fake jewelry. Girls! Mom's voice cut through the shouting. She stood in the doorway with Dad behind her. Enough. No, I said firmly. It's not enough. Barbara, where's the pawn ticket? I'm not giving it to you, she said, clutching her purse tighter. Not unless you sign the house back over to us. Barbara, Paul warned, but she ignored him. You want your special ring? She said. Then give us back our home. I looked at her, really looked. Her wedding dress was wrinkled and stained. Her makeup was smudged, and there was that brand new flashy ring on her finger. Probably just as expensive as the down payment they couldn't afford. You haven't changed since we were kids, I said quietly. Still thinking that if you cry long enough, people will give you what you want. And you're still the same, Barbara snapped. Bitter, jealous, always acting like the world owes you something. Stop it. Both of you. Dad stepped between us. This isn't what your grandmother would have wanted. No, I said, turning to face him. Jessica taught me to stand up for what matters. To protect what's mine. Where were you when Barbara took the ring? When Mom didn't sell it, just pawned it like it meant nothing? We were trying to help your sister, Mom said softly. By hurting me? I asked. I pulled out my phone and dialed Timothy. Hello? Yes. Please start the eviction process. Right away. Susan, no! Barbara cried and lunged at me, but Paul held her back. 29 days, I said into the phone, looking straight at her. Not a day more. You'll regret this, Mom said, her voice cold. Family is forever, Susan. Family? I looked around at the empty house. Family died the day you chose her wedding over Jessica's last wish. They left one by one. First Mom and Dad, then Paul, holding Barbara up as she cried uncontrollably. The pawn ticket stayed in her purse, along with the last bit of control she thought she had. Later that night, she slipped it under my door with a note. I hope it was worth it. My phone buzzed again. It was Margaret. Was it worth it? I looked around the house, my house, paid for with betrayal and filled with silence. The walls still echoed with Barbara's cries, Mom's angry voice, and Dad's quiet disappointment. No going back now, I texted Margaret. But as I stood, in what should have felt like victory, all I felt was empty. The next morning, the bell above the pawn shop door jingled as I walked in. Behind the counter, an old man looked up from his newspaper. "Can I help you?" he asked. I placed the pawn ticket on the counter. Barbara had finally given it to me. The man looked at the ticket, nodded, and went into the back. My heart was pounding. As I waited, thinking about what Jessica told me the day she gave me the ring. Power isn't in the gold, mi amor. It's in what we choose to do with it. The shop owner came back holding a small velvet box. Inside was Jessica's ring, the same old gold band with tiny diamonds, just as I remembered. The lights made it shine. "That'll be $4,000 plus interest," he said. I gave him my credit card. My hands shook as I slid the ring onto my finger. My phone buzzed. "Margaret, did you get it?" "Me. Yes. Meeting you in 20. I met Margaret at the courthouse. She was holding a large brown envelope. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as she handed me the papers. "No," I said honestly. "But Jessica would be." We drove to my parents' house in silence. Barbara's car was in the driveway, along with a moving truck. They were packing her things, getting ready to leave. Mom opened the door. Her face tightened when she saw me. "Here to gloat?" she said coldly. "No," I said, holding up the envelope. "I came to fix things." In the living room, Barbara sat among her wedding gifts, things they would have to return. Paul stood quietly by the window. Dad sat in his usual chair. "What's this?" Barbara asked as I placed the envelope on the table. "Open it," I said. Her fingers shook as she pulled out the papers. Her eyes widened as she read. "It's a lease," I explained. "1 year. You'll pay the regular market rent. After that, if you pay on time every month, you'll have the option to buy the house back." "Why?" Paul asked, stepping forward. "After everything?" I raised my hand. Jessica's ring caught the light. "Because this ring isn't about power or getting even. It's about family." Barbara looked at the ring. "How did you gave me the pawn ticket," I said, sitting next to her. "Barbara, what we did to each other, it has to stop." "But the house is yours now," she whispered. "You won." "Nobody won," I said gently, taking her hand. "Look at us. Look at what we've become." Mom stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the ring. "Your Jessica would be so disappointed in all of us." "No," I said softly. "She'd be waiting for us to make it right." Dad cleared his throat. "The rent payments? They're fair." "They're more than fair," Paul said, reading the papers. "Susan, this is very generous. With conditions," I added. "First, no more secrets, no more lies. And Barbara, you need help with your spending. Real help." Barbara nodded, tears falling down her cheeks. "I know. I've already called a financial advisor." "And the wedding gifts?" I asked. "They're being returned," Paul said firmly. "All of them. We're starting over." Mom touched the ring on my finger. "It looks right," she said quietly. "It belongs there." "Yes," I nodded. "And this house, it belongs to all of us. The memories we'll make. The family we'll rebuild. That's worth more than revenge." Barbara hugged me suddenly, crying into my shoulder. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. Me too, I whispered back. Dad stood nearby, his eyes watery. Your Jessica used to say that family is like a garden. Sometimes you have to cut back the plants to help them grow, but you don't tear out the roots. You help them grow stronger, I finished, remembering Jessica's words. Later that evening, as Barbara and Paul signed the lease papers, Mom brought out an old photo album. She opened to a page and smiled. Look, she said. Here's Jessica wearing the ring. Your 6th birthday, Susan. In the photo, Jessica sat between Barbara and me, one arm around each of us. The ring on her hand sparkled in the light, just like it did now. She knew, didn't she? Barbara asked softly. That someday we'd need something to bring us back together. She did, I said, touching the ring. She knew we'd find our way back, if we were brave enough to choose family over pride. That night, as I drove home, I passed the house, their house now, at least for the next year. The moving truck was gone and soft light shone through the windows. My phone buzzed one last time. Barbara. Thank you for giving us a second chance. We won't waste. And I smiled. Jessica's ring rested on my finger, right where it belonged. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in winning a fight. It's knowing when to stop it. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma doesn't come to punish. It comes to heal.